Hello, fourth grade historians. Welcome back. I am Mrs. Lamondo. We left off last time seeing a virtual field trip of Ellis Island. So we are going to continue where we left off to find out more about what it was actually like for immigrants who were processed through Ellis Island. Ellis Island was an immigration station in New York Harbor, so out in kind of the ocean, right near the Statue of Liberty, that opened in 1892 and, as we will soon find out, closed in 1954. So let's get back to where we left off.
Besides my great-grandparents' story,
Yes.
of course, there was a girl by the name of Carmina de Simone, who, like Annie, was the first something. Now, she was actually the first immigrant to be processed in this new building. So the building we're currently in, it opened in 1900. She was the first immigrant through, and there wasn't all the fanfare, but she still was the first immigrant through, and I think that's really interesting, mostly because it shows a shift in where immigrants are coming from. Because, of course, Annie was from Ireland, from northern and western Europe, and that's where you had a lot of immigrants prior to Ellis Island. But during Ellis Island's time and after, immigrants are coming from different places. So for the most part, for Ellis Island, a lot of immigrants are actually coming from southern and eastern Europe, like Italy.
Right, and Carmina was from Italy, exactly, where my great-grandparents came from, and I think we learned that there were about 4 million immigrants that arrived through Italy alone. Now, Annie and Carmina successfully made it through the process. They entered America. They started a new life. That wasn't always the case for everybody, right? Well, I have another question here from Michael Witt's fourth grade class from Alpharetta Elementary in Alpharetta, Georgia. Hey, guys, this is what they want to know. Let's listen.
What would be a reason that would cause the immigration department to turn away an immigrant and send him home?
And were families broken up by the fact that some immigrants were turned away?
Studying, too, while they're asking questions.
It's a great question.
Good question.
Here at Ellis Island, we were worried about people making a living, paying their bills, and actually getting to their next destination. You were here at Ellis, but this isn't where you're going to end your visit. You're moving further into the country. So we wanted to make sure that once you arrived here in the United States, you could support yourself, you could get a job and pay your bills, and not be a burden to the people already here.
Also, one of the things I touched on earlier on the tour was the 6-minute medical examination. And I wanted to elaborate a little on that because our students are really interested in knowing about this medical exam. In particular, Daryl Bryan's fourth grade class from Palm Avenue Elementary. Hey guys, you guys are coming to us from San Bernardino, California. Let's listen to their question.
Can you tell us about what the doctors were looking for when they examined the immigrants?
I like the little lab coat. That's very good.
They're ready. They're ready.
Yeah, doctors actually played a huge role here at Ellis Island. So doctors are looking for two things. They were looking to make sure that immigrants entering the United States were healthy enough to work so that they could support themselves and their families. Two, though, they wanted to make sure that immigrants entering the United States didn't have any contagious diseases that they were bringing in. It was a huge fear. Still is, really.
Right.
100 years ago, at Ellis Island's time, they were really concerned about a disease called trachoma. So trachoma, most people have never heard of it unless they're studying Ellis Island, and that's because it no longer exists in the United States. It still exists in different parts of the world. It causes blindness, and it's very contagious. And back in Ellis Island's time, that was a big problem. To check for trachoma, you'd have to look at the underside of the eyelid. So that sounds kind of scary. Mostly because the doctors would use what's called a button hook. It was never meant to be a medical instrument. It's meant to button buttons, but the doctors figured out that they could use this to help flip eyelids inside out.
They would use the actual hook to flip?
More like maybe the curved bottom part of the hook or the rod, just to kind of place it against maybe near the eyelashes, and then use the finger to kind of pull the eyelid up and over.
I was going to volunteer, but I think I'll pass.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah. Earlier, I talked a little bit about the stairs of separation, actually, where immigrants were actually divided into 3 groups, depending on where they were going or, as I said, if they were being detained. What happened when immigrants didn't actually meet the requirements to enter into this country?
When immigrants walked down the center aisle, many were detained for legal and medical reasons. If they were detained for medical reasons, the United States Public Health Service would actually treat many of these patients at little or no cost to the immigrants themselves.
And so they would stay in the hospital here on the site?
Absolutely.
Almost like quarantine. But what if there were other reasons for them to be detained? What would happen then? wouldn't there be, they'd have sort of the ability to be able to hear their case, right? So I know that we're sitting here in the hearing room, or what you guys call the Board of Special Inquiry, and there were, what I was told, 10-minute sessions in here where the immigrants were able to plead their case, right? And isn't it true also that friends and relatives could come and speak on their behalf? What happened in this room?
Well, absolutely. This is your second chance. If anything, any of the inspectors had a legal question about you, this was your chance to explain yourself further. And to help you, they would actually send a telegram to your final destination and invite your family or a representative, or ask you to send a letter to kind of speak up on your family's behalf. So the alien, they're not citizens yet, would sit here, and 3 legal inspectors in the chairs behind us would follow up on that question that caused problems to begin with. We also had a recorder. We had to write everything down, which is why we know that on average they were 10 minutes, and a translator if needed.
So it almost feels like in here it was almost like a trial going on.
It really was.
Yeah.
It really was. The difference was that since you're not a citizen yet, you don't have any of the rights that we know and that many people came for.
All right. Now, I know, and we've talked about this, that there are a lot of common misconceptions about what took place here on Ellis Island, and there are a few myths that you would like to dispel. So we're going to play a little game of fact or fiction, and you guys watching can play along. And the first question, or the first fact or fiction, is this: fact or fiction. 20% of immigrants who arrived on Ellis Island were turned away and sent home.
Well, that is actually fiction.
Fiction.
So 20% were detained here. So about 1 in 5 of those 12 million immigrants did stay on Ellis Island for a little bit longer, days, weeks, sometimes months, where they would get medical care or wait for their hearing. Really only 2% were actually denied entry and sent back. So those other 18% eventually made it in. It just took a little bit longer.
All right, so I'm doing the math in my head. So 2%. So of the 12 million, about 250,000 were actually sent home.
Yeah, so a lot of people, but a small percentage of that 12 million.
When you think about 12 million, yeah. All right, so here's the story. My great-grandfather, as I said, arrived from Italy. He came on June 18th, 1905. Now, my grandfather, my mom's father, swears that their name was shortened here on Ellis Island. So fact or fiction, was this common practice?
That also is fiction. So names were certainly changed, but not here on Ellis Island. Here on Ellis Island, the inspectors were looking at these manifests, these names that were written down already, and using that to verify information. So really, if there were misspellings, someone else wrote that. It wasn't the officials here. Also, many immigrants actually changed their names after they entered the United States, maybe as they became citizens, to just fit in a little bit more.
But you brought up something interesting, because the ship's manifest was what the inspectors were using, and there may have been a misspelling, or they may have had it may have been difficult to read the name.
Exactly, yep. They were all handwritten up through about World War I, and then they started to be typed. But still some of those same issues with typing.
All right, one more fact or fiction. Fact or fiction. Class structure affected the process for arriving immigrants.
Fact.
Wow.
Absolutely. The amount of money you could spend on a ticket made the difference. If you were in a first or second class compartment, you never even set foot on Ellis Island. You were inspected medically and legally on the ship itself. It's only those folks in the third class or steerage class that we were concerned about that came here to Ellis for a really thorough inspection.
So they were ferried over from the boat to the island.
Because those big steamships couldn't fit here in the slip.
Right, so we've been talking a lot about the process, right? What happened when immigrants arrived and they were processed through Ellis Island. But the journey, actually, for these immigrants didn't actually end here, for most of them, actually. And we have a question from Kelly Evelith's 4th grade class from Willow Grove Elementary in Poway, California. Hey, guys. And they want to know what happened after immigrants were processed. Let's listen.
What happened when the immigrants left Ellis Island? Was there a meeting place for them to find their friends and families? Where did most of the immigrants go, and how did they get there?
Very good questions.
Yeah,
Peter?
absolutely. Many immigrants actually met family members that they hadn't seen in years at the bottom of the stairs of separation. Now, some elected to take a ferry to Lower Manhattan. Those that decided to travel farther would actually purchase a train ticket, if they haven't already, and then take a boat to Jersey City, off to their next destination. Now, if you didn't come here with any family members, they had immigrant aid societies who will assist you. They'll help you find housing, they'll help you find jobs, and they'll help reunite you with people of your nationality. You know, many immigrants, in fact, go through use the similar resources today as well.
That's interesting. And speaking of today, I mean, I wanted to fast forward a little bit to today, because if we look at the cultural landscape of America today, I wanted to ask you why you thought this period in time that we've been discussing was so significant, so influential, actually.
Well, it's so influential because so many people came through in such a tight amount of time, and they settled all over the country. And while many of them really wanted to Americanize their names, be more like Americans, they still brought their foods, their traditions, those slang words you still say at home, over with them. And that is still very prevalent today, as well as in history.
So really, specifically, even those 32 years between 1892 and 1924 helped actually change the landscape of what America looks like today in many ways.
Many Americans today can trace back one or more family members to New York Harbor, Ellis Island, and that is a great influence on the country.
All right. While we've been talking here, some questions have been coming in live, and I'm going to ask a few of those right now. This first one is from Alicia Zimmerman's class from PS 33 right here in New York City in Chelsea. Hey, Chelsea. You've been focusing on years 1892 to 1924. What happened on Ellis Island after 1924? It's a good question.
Yeah, it is. After actually 1920, immigration laws started to change, and they changed how immigrants were processed. So all of a sudden, instead of coming to an immigration station like Ellis Island, you would actually be processed overseas, kind of similar to how it is today. And so by the 1940s, 1950s, really hardly anyone was coming through Ellis Island, certainly not in the numbers that we saw before. And since this is a big government installation, the government decided to shut it down. And really, you know, by the 60s especially, many immigrants were arriving by plane anyways.
That's
they
right.
wouldn't have come over on a steamship.
Very few by steamship by that point. Okay, here's another live question. It's from Susan Bartels' third grade class at North Verdemont Elementary in California. Hey guys, and they want to know, when immigrants were turned away, did they have to pay their own way back to their homeland?
Oh, great
question. Yeah.
No, actually, they did not. The steamship company that brought them was responsible for them until they were allowed into the United States. So if for any reason they needed to go back, the steamship company had to take them back.
Very cool. All right, we have one more live question. It's from PS 212 in Queens. Danielle Mahoney is the teacher, and they want to know this is a good question. If people came with money from another country, would they exchange their money for American dollars here on Ellis Island? That's a good question.
Yeah, they actually have a currency exchange station here on site, you know, with different languages. So a lot of the conversion would take place here as well.
So there's a little currency exchange right here on the island. That's really interesting. You know, we've been talking about national parks, Ellis Island being one of them, and so many millions of people visit national parks on a yearly basis. You said 2 million alone come to Ellis Island each year. What is it that you hope children and teachers and families who visit are taking away with them?
It's really important to me that they take away this power of the place, to actually be in this historic space, or maybe be in this really beautiful natural space. And just really take that with them, just how powerful that is.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, and each of our national parks is created because it's unique. It's a very special, one-of-a-kind place. And I hope that while they're here in person or visiting us virtually, they can gain a deeper understanding and a personal connection to the space they're in, and then take that with them when they leave.
Yeah, it's good too.
Yeah, I want our visitors to see immigration as a timeless story. I mean, today, many people see immigration today either in their families, their communities, their schools, local businesses. And today, many immigrants arrive with many of the same dreams and aspirations as those 100 years ago. And when they come to a site, I want them to actually find these connections. And I think many will be surprised with the similarities that they'll find.
Well, you say the dream, and I have to say, in all of my visiting here, I couldn't help but feel the power of the American dream. It almost permeates the entire island, the facility, the museum. It's just everywhere. And right before the webcast, I was noticing some kids who were just so excited to be discovering a part of their ancestry here on the island. So it's extraordinary. I really want to thank you all for joining us here today. I want to thank you guys all for joining us today on this virtual field trip back in time. I especially want to thank the Ellis Island Immigration Museum and the National Park Service. You guys have allowed us access to a treasure trove of information and knowledge. And I think we're all so lucky that this important piece in American history still exists, and that there are people like you and all of you all the National Park Service rangers who are here to preserve them for generations to come. So
All right, we're going to pause there for today. Hopefully you got a better idea of what it was actually like for immigrants to enter through Ellis Island. As we move forward in our unit, we'll be looking at different immigrants who are coming through Ellis Island. We'll have to determine whether they would make it through, whether they would be detained or not. We'll be hearing actual stories of immigrants that came through and stories of people looking for their ancestors through Ellis Island databases. All right, 4th grade historians, until next time, I will see you then. Bye.